Imagine you waking up in the middle of winter. The air burns your lungs with every breath. Snow stretches to the horizon. There are no houses, no roads, no warm clothes waiting in your closet, no fireplace you can simply light with the push of a button. Every step through the frozen landscape drains your strength, and somewhere beyond the trees, hungry predators are searching for their next meal. This wasn't a nightmare. It was everyday life for ancient humans. Surprisingly, they weren't just surviving chilly winters. They were living through some of the harshest climates our species has ever faced. During the last ice age, vast sheets of ice covered enormous parts of the northern hemisphere, while temperatures in many regions dropped far below anything most of us have ever experienced. Food became scarce. Darkness lasted longer. One mistake could mean freezing to death before sunrise. Yet generation after generation, humans didn't disappear. They adapted. But here's the catch. They had none of the things we depend on today. No insulated homes, no central heating, no supermarkets stocked with food, no waterproof jackets or thermal boots. Everything they needed to stay alive had to be built, discovered, or hunted with their own hands. And somehow, against overwhelming odds, they managed to turn one of the most unforgiving environments on Earth into a place they could call home. Turns out, their survival wasn't based on brute strength or simple luck. It depended on remarkable ingenuity, careful planning, and a level of cooperation that most people rarely associate with prehistoric life. Many of the strategies they developed thousands of years ago were surprisingly sophisticated, and some are still echoed in modern survival techniques today. So, how did ancient humans survive the brutal winters? The answer is far more fascinating than most people realize, and it reveals just how extraordinary our ancestors truly were. Winter didn't just bring freezing temperatures, it brought a much bigger problem. Once the sun disappeared, so did almost every advantage humans had. Darkness made it nearly impossible to hunt, predators became more active, and the cold drained body heat with alarming speed. Unlike mammoths wrapped in thick fur or bears protected by layers of fat, humans were surprisingly vulnerable. We had relatively bare skin, small energy reserves, and bodies that had to work constantly just to stay warm. In the Ice Age, losing heat wasn't just uncomfortable, it was often fatal. Actually, our ancestors had already discovered the one tool that changed everything: fire. But it wasn't simply a way to warm cold hands, it became the foundation of human survival, solving multiple life or death problems at once. A single fire transformed an entire camp. Its heat slowed dangerous heat loss, allowing people to survive nights that would otherwise be deadly. The light pushed back the darkness, giving families extra hours to repair tools, prepare food, and teach the next generation. Even large predators were often reluctant to approach bright flames, creating a safer place to sleep in a world where every night carried new dangers. But here's what made fire truly remarkable. Cooking changed the food itself. Heat broke down tough fibers in meat and plants, making them easier to chew, digest, and absorb. That meant ancient humans could extract more energy from every meal while spending less energy processing it. Some scientists even argue that this extra nutrition helped support the growth of our unusually large brains over thousands of generations. In other words, fire didn't just keep humans alive, it may have helped shape the kind of humans we eventually became. Today, we barely think about turning on a stove or switching on a heater. For Ice Age families, protecting a single flame may have been one of the most important jobs in the entire group. If the fire went out during a brutal winter storm, replacing it could be difficult, or impossible. But even the hottest fire had its limits. A campfire could warm the people sitting nearby, yet it couldn't stop freezing winds from stealing that precious heat. To truly survive winter, ancient humans needed something more permanent. They needed shelter. At first, caves offered an obvious solution. Deep inside, temperatures stayed surprisingly stable throughout the year. While they weren't exactly cozy, they shielded people from snow, rain, and the relentless wind outside. A fire burning inside a cave became dramatically more effective because the surrounding rock trapped much of its heat instead of letting it drift away. Suddenly, one small campfire could warm an entire living space. But here's the interesting part. Ancient humans didn't simply wait until they found the perfect cave. When nature didn't provide shelter, they built their own. Across parts of Ice Age Europe, archaeologists have uncovered remarkable circular homes constructed from mammoth bones. Massive leg bones formed sturdy walls, while enormous tusks created curved supports overhead. Thick animal hides were stretched across the frame, sealing out much of the freezing wind. It may sound primitive today, but these structures were surprisingly well designed. Every material had a purpose, and every piece helped conserve the warmth generated by the fire inside. Building one wasn't a job for a single person. Gathering hundreds of heavy bones, transporting them across frozen ground, and assembling them into stable shelters required planning, cooperation, and shared knowledge. These weren't temporary hiding places, they were carefully engineered homes where families cooked, slept, repaired tools, and waited together for winter to loosen its grip. Today we rely on insulation hidden inside our walls and double-glazed windows without giving them a second thought. Ancient humans achieved the same goal using stone, bone, hides, and remarkable ingenuity. But safety ended the moment they stepped outside. Every hunting trip, every search for firewood, and every journey across the frozen landscape meant stepping back into air cold enough to steal your body heat within minutes. Unlike many Ice Age animals, humans had a serious disadvantage. We had already lost most of our thick body hair millions of years earlier. In a brutal winter, that decision by evolution came with a price. So humans found another way. Instead of growing fur, they learned to wear it. Turns out, making warm clothing was far more complicated than simply throwing an animal skin over your shoulders. Fresh hides quickly became stiff, cracked, and uncomfortable. Ancient people had to carefully scrape away tissue, soften the leather, and preserve it before it became useful. One of the most effective methods was brain tanning, which used oils from an animal's own brain to transform rough hides into flexible leather that remained soft even in freezing weather. But here's where it gets surprisingly advanced. Archaeologists have discovered delicate bone needles dating back tens of thousands of years. These weren't crude tools. Some were so finely crafted that they could stitch tightly fitted garments with sleeves, trousers, boots, and hoods. Layer by layer, these clothes trapped pockets of warm air around the body, creating insulation remarkably similar to the winter clothing many people wear today. The result was revolutionary. Clothing didn't just make people more comfortable, it allowed them to travel farther, hunt longer, and settle in regions that would otherwise have been impossible to inhabit. Entire landscapes became accessible because humans had learned to carry warmth with them. Today, putting on a winter jacket takes only a few seconds. For our ancestors, every stitch represented hours of careful work, and often the difference between life and death. But staying warm was only half the battle. Even the best clothing couldn't help if the body itself ran out of fuel, and that made the next challenge even more critical: finding enough food to survive the endless winter. That's why Ice Age people weren't just hunting for meat. They were hunting for calories. Surprisingly, the most valuable part of a large animal wasn't always its muscle, it was its fat. Fat contains more than twice the energy per gram compared to protein or carbohydrates, making it the perfect fuel for surviving brutal winters. A successful hunt could provide enough energy to sustain an entire group for weeks, but only if nothing went to waste. Ancient hunters became masters of preparation. Meat was sliced into thin strips and dried to prevent spoilage. Fat was carefully rendered and stored for later use. In regions where the ground remained permanently frozen, nature itself became a giant freezer. Food caches buried in frozen soil could preserve precious supplies until they were needed most. Think about how casually we open a refrigerator today. Our ancestors had to predict their needs months in advance, preserving enough food before winter tightened its grip. Their survival depended not just on strength, but on careful planning and remarkable self-control. But even the largest food supply couldn't guarantee survival if one person tried to do everything alone. The greatest advantage humans possessed wasn't hidden in their shelters or stored beneath the frozen ground. It was found in each other. They survived together. Ancient hunter-gatherers lived in tightly connected groups where every individual contributed something valuable. Some hunted large game, others gathered edible plants, repaired clothing, crafted tools, or cared for children. Older members of the group carried something even more important than physical strength. They carried experience. An elder who remembered where animals migrated during harsh winters or which valley stayed sheltered from icy winds could save dozens of lives with a single decision. But here's what most people don't realize. Knowledge itself became one of humanity's greatest survival tools. Long winter nights brought families together around the fire, where stories were shared from one generation to the next. These weren't simply tales told to pass the time, they preserved practical information about dangerous animals, changing seasons, successful hunting grounds, and mistakes that should never be repeated. In a world without books, every conversation helped protect the future. Modern life often celebrates independence, but human evolution tells a different story. Our greatest achievements have almost always come through cooperation. The same teamwork that once helped ancient families survive freezing winters still shapes hospitals, cities, scientific discoveries, and nearly every part of modern society. Working together made ancient humans stronger, but they also understood something equally important. Sometimes the smartest survival strategy wasn't staying put, it was knowing when to leave. Winter transformed the landscape. Herds of reindeer, bison, and other large animals followed seasonal migration routes in search of food. If humans remained in one place while their prey disappeared over the horizon, starvation soon followed. Survival depended on moving at exactly the right time. Surprisingly, these journeys weren't random. Ancient people weren't wandering through the wilderness hoping to get lucky. They followed familiar routes that had been passed down through generations. Rivers became natural highways. Sheltered valleys offered protection from harsh winds. Certain campsites were visited again and again because people knew they would provide water, game, and safe places to rest. Imagine planning a journey hundreds of kilometers long without a map, compass, or GPS. Every landmark had to be remembered. Every river crossing, mountain pass, and hunting ground existed only in human memory. Those mental maps became one of the most valuable forms of knowledge a community possessed, allowing families to return to the right places year after year. Today, we simply check a navigation app before leaving home. Ancient humans carried an entire landscape inside their minds, relying on observation, experience, and shared knowledge instead of technology. Looking back, it's tempting to think that ancient humans survived the Ice Age because they discovered fire, built clever shelters, or learned to make warm clothing. Those inventions were remarkable, but they all shared one common origin. The real secret wasn't a tool, it was the human mind. Unlike most animals, humans could imagine problems before they happened. They could notice subtle changes in the weather, remember what had worked years earlier, and prepare long before danger arrived. Instead of simply reacting to the world, they learned to predict it. That ability changed everything. Think about it. A fire only exists because someone gathered wood before nightfall. A shelter only protects a family because someone built it before the storm arrived. Food lasts through winter because someone planned months ahead while resources were still plentiful. Every successful strategy began as an idea long before it became an action. Even culture became a survival tool. Stories, rituals, and shared traditions helped preserve knowledge across generations, allowing each new group to begin where the last one left off instead of starting from nothing. Over thousands of years, those small improvements accumulated, making humans more adaptable than any physical feature ever could. Today, our challenges look very different. We rarely worry about freezing nights or hungry predators, yet we still rely on the same ability that carried our ancestors through the Ice Age: planning ahead, sharing knowledge, solving problems together, and preparing for a future we cannot yet see. In the end, ancient humans didn't conquer winter because they were the strongest creatures on Earth. They survived because they became the smartest collaborators nature had ever produced. And that's a legacy every one of us still carries today. Summary: when we picture the Ice Age, it's easy to focus on the snow, the mammoths, and the freezing temperatures. But those were only the backdrop. The real story was never about winter itself. It was about how humans learned to solve problems that seemed impossible. They didn't survive because they were bigger, faster, or stronger than the animals around them. They survived because they could observe, adapt, cooperate, and prepare for challenges long before they arrived. Every fire they protected, every shelter they built, every piece of clothing they stitched, and every journey they planned became another step in a survival strategy refined over thousands of generations. That same strategy still lives inside us today. Our homes keep us warm instead of mammoth-bone shelters. Our refrigerators replace frozen food caches. Modern winter coats do the job once performed by carefully stitched animal hides. Even the way we pass knowledge from teachers to students, parents to children, or through books and the internet follows the same ancient pattern. Human survival has always depended on sharing ideas just as much as sharing food. But perhaps the most remarkable inheritance isn't any tool or technology. It's the ability to imagine a future that hasn't happened yet. Every time you prepare for tomorrow, solve a difficult problem, or work together with others toward a common goal, you're using the same mental abilities that helped a small group of humans endure one of the harshest climates our species has ever faced. The Ice Age eventually came to an end, but the qualities it demanded never disappeared. They became part of who we are. They shaped our societies, our cultures, and the extraordinary world we've built together. So the next time you step inside on a cold winter evening, remember that your greatest protection was never just the walls around you. It has always been the remarkable mind that imagined those walls in the first place. If you enjoyed uncovering this chapter of our past, there are many more incredible stories about human evolution, ancient history, and survival waiting to be explored. Until next time, keep wondering how the past continues to shape the people we are today.